Imagine Europe in the 15th century. A small town, narrow streets, wooden houses. People live quietly and simply. And suddenly a tragedy occurs. A child dies. The culprit is found quickly. He is arrested, locked up. A trial is scheduled. Witnesses are called. A verdict is prepared. Everything is usual. But there is one detail that completely shatters the perception. The accused is a pig. This is not a joke, not a legend, and not a scary fairy tale. For several centuries in Europe, animals were really tried. For real. By law. They were appointed lawyers. Sentences were passed on them. And sometimes they were executed. The strangest thing is that people of that time saw nothing unusual in this. At the end of the 19th century, historian Edward Paxton Evans began studying old court archives. He found trial transcripts, notary records, and judges' decisions. The deeper he dug, the stranger it became. In 1906, he published a study in which he collected dozens of similar cases. Animals were tried in France, Switzerland, Italy, and the Holy Roman Empire. These were not pranks. They were not performances. And they were not folk traditions. They were part of the real judicial system. Let's start with one of the most gruesome and strange cases. In 1457, the small French town of Savigny. In those days, pigs roamed freely in the streets. They were part of everyday life. But sometimes they became dangerous. Once, one of them attacked a child. The child died. The town was in shock. People demanded justice. The authorities did what they thought was right. The pig was arrested. Yes, that's right. It was taken into custody like a common criminal. But that wasn't the end of it. The pig had piglets. And the question arose, were they also involved in the attack? They were also brought into the case. A full-fledged trial began. Witnesses were called. The circumstances were examined. The judge handed down a verdict. The main pig was found guilty. The piglets were acquitted. The court decided that there was insufficient evidence of their involvement. It sounds absurd, but this shows how seriously people took such cases. Even in such a trial, they tried to observe justice. The guilty pig was sentenced to death. For the townspeople, this was not cruelty. It was considered a restoration of order. But this case is far from unique. Let's go back a little. The year is 1386. The city of False. Almost the same story unfolds. A pig attacks a child. The city authorities decide to hold a show trial. The pig is kept in prison. It is officially tried and found guilty. But then something even stranger happens. Before the sentence is carried out, the pig is dressed in human clothes. This is not mockery. It is a symbol. People believe that the animal had committed a crime like a human being. Therefore, the punishment must also be human. The city even paid for the executioner's services. These expenses are recorded in documents. Such sentences were carried out publicly. People came to watch. It was a kind of warning. The law works. Order is restored. The guilty are punished. And it doesn't matter whether it's a human or an animal. But over time, creatures far less conspicuous began to appear in the dock. 1522, the town of Autun. The locals are facing a serious problem. Rats are destroying the barley harvest. And the harvest is food. It's survival. It's life. The situation is getting critical. So, they take it to the church court. The court makes a decision that sounds almost unreal today. The rats are summoned to court. Officially, they are assigned a lawyer named Barthélemy de Chassagne, and he begins to defend them. Seriously. His arguments have gone down in history. He claimed that the summons had not been served on all the rats. This meant that the defendants had not been properly notified. Then he added another argument. Even if the rats wanted to come to court, the road was dangerous for them. They could be eaten by cats on the way. This meant that the defendants' safety could not be guaranteed. And without safety, they could not be required to appear. And the most surprising thing is that the court agreed. The hearing was postponed. This no longer looks like a joke. This is real legal logic. just applied literally. But it gets even stranger. A pig can be arrested, or a rat can at least be brought to trial. But what to do with insects? In the 15th and 16th centuries, vineyards in the Lausanne region suffered from pest infestations, crops were destroyed, people lost money and food. And then the church intervened. A church court was held. Insects were officially accused of destroying crops. They were ordered to leave the territory. Sometimes they were even allocated a separate plot of land. Symbolically, as if to say, here is your place. Live there. And don't touch the grapes. If that didn't help, the insects were excommunicated, cursed by the church. Today, this sounds like something mystical. But back then, it was perceived as a real measure. To understand this, you need to imagine how people viewed the world at that time. Medieval people lived in a system where everything was subject to divine order. If a tragedy occurred, it meant that this order had been disrupted, and it had to be restored. Punishing animals served several purposes. First, it provided an explanation. It was difficult for people to accept that death could be accidental. Second, it restored a sense of control. The law demonstrated its power. And third, it had religious significance. All living things were considered part of God's world. Even animals could be perceived as creatures that had violated the established order. By the 17th century, Europe had begun to change. Science was developing. Thinking was changing. A new understanding of nature was emerging. The French philosopher René Descartes proposed an idea that had a profound effect on people. He said that animals act on instinct. They do not understand good and evil. This meant that they could not bear moral responsibility. Gradually, attitudes changed. Trials involving animals became increasingly rare. By the 18th century, they had almost disappeared. The strangest thing about the story is not even that people judge pigs, rats, and insects. The strangest thing is that it was completely logical to them. They did not see it as madness. They saw it as justice. And perhaps in a few hundred years, some of our habits will also seem strange and incomprehensible to someone. If you like such strange, awkward, and truly absurd moments in the history of the colonial era, you've come to the right place. This is just the beginning. Because the 17th and 18th centuries were a time when people were discovering the world and constantly making mistakes. Subscribe to Colonial Cringe.